Donald Trump showing us some old 2020 ways and how he certainly is being as normal for him as possible, returning to the state of Georgia and deciding to attack Brian Kemp, the popular GOP governor who he tried to defeat unsuccessfully in the primary in 2022. Let's take a listen to what he had to say about the state's popular governor.
Kemp doesn't want to end it because he's a bad guy, he's a disloyal guy, and he's a very average governor. Little Brian Kemp, bad guy. But think of it. I got this guy, just think, and then that's it. I got this guy nominated, I then got him elected. Without me, he doesn't get nominated and he doesn't get elected. He had no chance of winning either one, and all he had to do is sign something where the Senate would like to look at election integrity. This is an honest man. That's an honest man. They were all honest. They were looking at something very legitimate. And this bad guy said, "I'm sorry, sir. I can't do it." I called him and I said, "Brian, they're looking at election integrity. Is there anything you can do?" "I'm sorry, sir. I can't get involved in that." I said, "But Brian, you don't understand. This is a good thing, not a bad thing." "I'm sorry, sir. I can't get involved." I've had you up to here, Brian. I've had you up to here. He's a bad guy, and he's not doing this country a good service.
Whew. All right. Well, Donald Trump certainly right back to his old ways. It certainly hasn't been changed by anything. And just sticking with the sheer electoral consequences of this, imagine in October 2020, I tell you, there will be 2 Democrats who will represent state of Georgia in the United States Senate. There will be a primary challenge backed by Donald Trump against 2 GOP officials. And all of those, not only will the Democrats win, but then those Republicans who stood up to Trump will actually have an electoral advantage at the ballot box in Georgia, which we previously thought of all as a red state. Oh, and Joe Biden actually won that state in 2020. So it's very clear that this is an electoral massive loser in the state of Georgia, regardless of whether Trump believes it or not. And as we all learned at the ballot box with Brian Kemp and Brad Raffensperger, the Secretary of State, Republican voters, yes, Republican voters did not even care as much about these issues because Kemp defeated, what was his name, David Perdue, the former senator, by the way, with huge name recognition, by some 70% margin. He went down massively. And Brad Raffensperger won as well, which people were even shocked by. So at this point, Donald Trump clearly is consumed by his own petty grievances about personal loyalty and is very willing to risk a margin in a state where maybe under Joe Biden, he could get away with this. But under Kamala Harris and with the polls where they are right now, only 2% plus advantage in the state of Georgia, shouldn't be messing around. This is Trump really at his worst.
Brian Kemp, I just looked it up, has a 63% approval rating in the state of Georgia.
That's crazy.
He's very popular. He's way more popular than Donald Trump is in the state of Georgia. It's just like not even close. And, you know, part of, this is something Zed Jelani's been tweeting about, who I believe he's from Georgia. I think he lives in Georgia again, right?
Yeah.
He's been tweeting about the fact, I mean, Kemp has governed very conservatively. You know, he's very much in line with like, you know, the Trump direction of the party in terms of his ideology. But because he's seen as being oppositional to Trump, that has actually given him a lot of credibility with moderate voters in spite of his pretty hard right ideological leaning, which just is a long way of saying so much of our politics is just about like vibes and how you feel about the singular figure of Donald Trump. And that is certainly the case here. But I also felt like watching this all unfold, you know, sometimes you give Trump way too much credit. We always think he's doing some 4D chess move. There is no universe in which this makes any sense electorally, where it is anything other than shooting yourself in the foot electorally. And we saw this last time in Georgia. Saagar, we talked about this so much. Because he cast so much doubt on mail-in ballots, he lost out on Republican votes in the state of Georgia because they weren't able to bank those mail-in ballots ahead of time. And that alone was probably responsible for that thin margin that he lost by in the state of Georgia. So it wouldn't be the first time that he shot himself in the foot and undermined his own electoral chances in a critical now swing state. So it's just like, it reminds you how foolish this man can be and how sometimes he's just preternaturally gifted in terms of sensing a political moment and political opportunity. And sometimes he is the dumbest person politically on the face of the planet.
I think Donald Trump is like the most high variance person that's ever existed. When he's good, he's great. And when he's bad, he's so horrible. And you just never know what you're going to get. This is also, testament to the fact that sometimes you want a more middle of the road person whenever you have this slight advantage, because you want to make things a little bit less or more predictable, and you want to run on the fundamentals, which a lot of the American people actually do say that they want out of politics now that they're generally exhausted in this political moment. Nonetheless, you do still have the MAGA base who very much is with him. But the real lesson of 2022 is that the base can only get you so far, even in Republican primaries, and that the base and its own predilections can be so repellent to the general public whenever it's backed up by something like Stop the Steal that many people will put their own economic concerns aside and they will come out specifically to vote against you. You see this in the problems with Carrie Lake in Arizona, where she continues to trail a lot of the MAGA candidates that lost in 2022, and it is a significant electoral problem in a race where you have it very, very tight, and in a state like Georgia, where you have massive influx of these suburban voters from all across the country. I mean, Atlanta is booming, open for business. Part of the reason Brian Kemp is so popular. You have a major population influx. All the fundamentals are there for a huge change and takeover in the state's economy. And they would be very willing to vote for a normal Republican like a Brian Kemp, as we have seen, in his electoral tally. The problem for Trump is that he actually single-handedly makes it a toss-up. And let's put this up there on the screen too. You just don't want this going into the election. You have Brian Kemp here responding to Trump's truth. Keep this up because I'm going to read. Trump put out a Truth Social post. He says, Brad Raffensperger has to do his job, make sure this election is not stolen. Brian Kemp should focus his efforts on fighting crime, not fighting unity in the Republican Party. His crime rate is terrible. His crime rate in Atlanta is the worst. His economy is average. He's making unity, not retribution, especially against the man that got him the nomination through endorsement and without whom he never would have beaten Stacey Abrams. He and his wife don't even think he could win. I said, I'm telling you, he goes on to a story about Brian Kemp's wife, how she won't endorse him. He says, well, I don't want her endorsement. I don't want this. They're the ones who got Fani Willis and her boyfriend all jazzed up and ready to go. He could have ended that travesty with a phone call, but he doesn't want to end it because he's a bad guy. So that's both about Brad Raffensperger and Brian Kemp. Kemp responds, my focus is on winning this November and saving our country from Kamala Harris and the Democrats, not engaging in petty personal insults, attacking fellow Republicans, or dwelling on the past. You should do the same, Mr. President, and leave my family out of it. And I can just tell you very clearly that all the evidence says that Brian's message there is 10 times more popular than Donald Trump. So this really is the worst of Trump. And it also shows you, everyone always talks about discipline, etc. I think Trump has been around long enough now at this point that there is no such thing as the disciplined Trump. I think Trump is still having a very difficult time adjusting to Kamala in the race. And psychologically, I can understand it. You had so much confidence that you were going to win. You had the coach, you had the winds at your back in a way for almost 2 years now that he has been in the race since he launched it. You've had some setbacks where you were relatively confident. And then the span of just 2 weeks, everything has changed. And he's always had difficulty calibrating, changing his message, and more. And given the in sheer insanity of the last month or so in American politics, it is understandable that doesn't make it any less toxic at the ballot box for him.
Yeah, it smells desperate. I mean, it just seems like he is completely sort of melting down and has lost his sense of what to do in this race and how to do it, and is just randomly lashing out.
Hey, if you like that video, hit the like button or leave a comment below. It really helps get the show to more people.
And if you'd like to get the full show ad-free and in your inbox every morning, you can sign up at breakingpoints.com.
That's right. Get the full show, help support the future of independent media at breakingpoints.com.